And welcome to tomorrow. My name is Jamie Higginbotham. We have got an action-packed, epic episode for you today. We are definitely going to get into Starliner in just a moment, but we do have a little bit of a fun surprise. Um, Back in the day, we had a bunch of people working on the show, some old hosts and whatnot, and over time we had to say goodbye to a bunch of them. But I'm really happy to say that today we get to say hello back to one of them. So we are reintroducing Space Bike back into the episodes of tomorrow, who will, as you may have realized, it is very difficult for me to be able to speak about Company X at all, or even be on the show when Company X is very, very busy. So we needed a new Jamie. And when I did some soul searching, it was a pretty clear choice as to who the new Jamie would be. Someone willing to play with the show, break it a little bit, have some fun, but also have the time necessary to actually do something great. So I'm excited to say that starting, actually, technically, I think it was last week, we're bringing Space Mike back into the show. Um, no. Yeah, Mitchell says an episode where I'm allowed to talk about the topic. No, not allowed to talk, but like, hi everyone, say hi to Space Mike.
Hello,
Space, great
everybody.
to have you back. It's been a lot of fun coordinating
I'm
with
so
you, and
excited to be back.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun coordinating with you and dreaming of the future and seeing what we'll be able to do with the shows. So I'm really, really excited to see what you're going to bring. And it's going to be more than just live shows, right? Like if you remember
Right.
from Days Yonder, it was, and I'm not saying this is what it will be, but it was space nudes. It was a whole bunch of stuff that we were working on, and it's just a time problem. And so hopefully we have fixed the time problem with Space Mike, and I'm really glad to welcome you back in.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, lots of ideas that we have coming up. So, going to be experimenting with a few things. You might see some things from us in the near future that we haven't really done before or similar, but has a new look to it and kind of a fresh perspective to it. But I'm really excited to be able to finally give this channel the time that it deserves and try to make something great out of this. This is tomorrow for crying out loud. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing as many things as we can to bring the excitement about space to as many people as we can. So, very, very happy and excited to talk about all the things that are happening now with everything happening every single day. It's kind of hard sometimes to cover everything. Isn't that right, guys?
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially for those of us who work in aerospace, it's all-encompassing, time-consuming. So I'm really excited to see what some of the new stuff that you bring out, and I know that you're excited too. So this will be great. All right, let's jump into our main topics because speaking of exciting things, I feel like Boeing did a thing this last week.
Did they?
Something,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know, right?
It's something.
Actually, if you remember, Liam Kennedy from ISS Above fame and from CEN actually has, well, CEN has cameras up on the International Space Station, and they were able to capture the undocking of Starliner. Data, if you'd like it, and um, this is 4K footage from CEN, which you can go to the CEN website, and there's a CEN app that you can go to grab all of this stuff. But look at how incredible that looks. Now, this is the same docking station or docking port, I believe, that Dragon will go up to. So if you can imagine a Dragon or other spacecraft docked there, this is the view you're going to get from CEN, which I think is pretty incredible. Scott, this is test footage, so I think they've got some exposure issues here. They can work that out, right? So like they got the core system up and working though, which is I think better than where we were last time we brought Liam on. Now, I know this certainly isn't Starliner itself, but like I still thought it was really cool and beautiful footage. I don't know how widely around the internet that's been circulated, maybe quite a bit. I don't. Ryan, did NASA spaceflight have that a week ago? Is that how this works? Like, where?
No, no. We didn't get any early access to it. But I'm personally, and I did a tweet to them as well. I'm very excited for Sen's new package, I should say, that they've got on the ISS now. It's taken a little while for them to get it up and running, but I mean that's to be expected. I believe what Liam said in whenever he came on, it was a little while ago. They have like three cameras, so they have one looking at the docking port, like we just saw, one looking down at Earth, and then one looking forward. So especially when we have these space traffic turnovers with undocking and vehicles visiting and whatnot. I mean, this is just miles ahead of what NASA has been able to provide through their own cameras, which have been up there for many, many years at this point. So it's very exciting. The more real a shot and a video feed feels, then it just makes space feel more accessible, if you know what I mean. Like, that is a real spacecraft really doing real things in front of my eyes. I'm really excited for things that just make it so much more tangible.
Speaking of a real spacecraft that did real tangible things, um, Boeing had a slightly "I told you so" moment to NASA. They successfully returned Starliner back down to Earth. Um, I'll leave it let me hand it to Zach. I assume everyone here was following that in real time. I was in the air on my phone watching it, and everyone around me was looking at my phone, right? So I'm sure all space nerds were watching this landing coverage. Zach, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts during this whole thing?
I'll eat my words if I think it was last week. If I think it'll get stuck in orbit for a little bit. They didn't do that, and well done them. I'm happy to see that is how it played out. But it looked like a very typically perfect reentry and landing. Looks like it went right where they were. I wouldn't complain if we got some of those send cameras, down in White Sands, so we could see it a bit more, and maybe a couple on board. But no, I think some of the views that came in, some of the videos that came through social, people getting to see it, a trajectory that most people don't normally get to see a reentry. That we're able to see it in Phoenix and a few other places. It looked perfect. Now the big question is, was it actually perfect, or did it look it? I think one of the big things that happened after, not to take away from the landing, is Boeing was supposed to be part of the post-landing conference, and 5 minutes before it started, they pulled both the Boeing chairs out of NASA, even though they were already in the building. So who knows what happened?
Well, hang on. I wonder if that was them throwing a little bit of a hissy fit, right? And ceremoniously, think about just the idea that there were supposed to be two more people on that panel, and there were two people short, right?
No, you
I
you want to
wonder if
throw
they were making a
you,
point.
you want to throw a hissy fit. You leave empty chairs.
Well, yeah, but it's not their call to leave the empty chairs, right? This is a NASA press conference, not a Boeing press conference. So if they say
Sure.
to Boeing, "Hey, we're not going to do this," Boeing's going to pull the chairs. But also, why in the world would they not be there? They just had that was a successful flight. That was
Yeah.
great.
I wanted them to sit down and say, "I told you
No,
so."
no, that was
Look,
not a
we did it.
successful flight. That was a successful result.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. Well, arguably their missions were to send humans up to the space station and bring them back. NASA chose not to bring them back. I guess the question becomes, had humans been on board, would they have been fine? I don't know the answer to that.
Don't know.
Externally, though, it looks like the answer is yes.
I believe I heard they did 85% of the mission objectives completely.
Yeah, NASA's official line is that they accomplished 85 to 90% of what they were expecting on the test flight. But that's NASA officially saying that. So,
But I mean, this is a test flight. It's rare that you get 100% of anything in any test objective, right? Something always goes wrong. I mean, except maybe Dutta. All of his engineering is perfect. I kid. Okay, so I'll hand it to you, Jared. What were your thoughts during landing? What were you doing, and what was it like?
well, I was at Griffith Observatory actually, and we were watching it live from Zach's channel down in our area there, and we had about 100 people come through during landing and watch it. So it was great to be able to share that with people, and we were kind of talking people through the process as to what's happening, what are you seeing right now, and it was pretty much what I expected it to be. I believe last week I said I think it's going to work as it should, and then it's going to have a normal reentry and landing process. And lo and behold, here we are. There were some things that did happen. I believe in the press conference they did mention that they did lose two thrusters on the service module during post undocking testing with it there. And I believe they also said that they lost a thruster on the actual capsule command module itself of Starliner. So Yeah, that was an interesting thing, and I'm wondering if there is a commonality between the thrusters on the Starliner capsule and the Starliner service module. Because the service module, obviously, we have lost that because that burned up during reentry, which is expected. But with that thruster on the command module, it's back here on Earth, so we can see what it's done. We can actually pick it apart and look at it nice up and close to get an idea as to what the problem was. So if there is a commonality between the thruster on the command module and thruster on the service module, then that would be a fantastic failure. Simply because that will provide like actual up close answers to what Boeing needs to know for their service module right there. So I'm really hoping that there is a commonality between the two there. And also, what I heard too was that the reason the two Boeing folks that were originally planning to be at the presser didn't show up at the presser was because they didn't want them to be the focus. They wanted NASA to focus on that there. So they were just not. They didn't want themselves to draw the attention. They wanted it to be fully with NASA. As to whether that's true, and yes, don't worry, I'm tilting my head at that one too. So don't worry. That's just what Boeing said. But as to whether that's what's actually going on, I think we'll have to see over the next month or two. And you know, it's anybody's game at this point as to what's happening. Let the rumors fly. I guess is what's happening.
Hey, makes for a fun, good story, doesn't it? Right? Like
That's
everyone
true.
loves speculating, right? They
Yeah.
added to the drama, and we all love drama. So all right,
if there's a crew 8 or 9 briefing, the Boeing people should just show up with their own chairs.
just pop in at Crew 9, punk. Well, our
They should
astronauts are on
be-
this one, so
Y'all know that gif of the guy getting the pop up chair out and setting it down. That's how I want to see them walk in. Just
Bam.
put it down and bam. So
Ryan, how was it from Europe?
Well, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, so I was in bed and I was watching it on my phone, very small. And I believe I predicted last week that it would come back softly and nicely, but they would have some troubles with the thrusters. And that's kind of exactly what happened. It came back softly and they had some troubles with the thrusters. So, you know, I was anxious about it making it through entry and all of that, as I would be with any other spacecraft. But Boeing has proven now on 3 separate occasions that they are capable of bringing Starliner back to Earth successfully when they have a mission clock that's just, you know, completely out of whack, a successful docking and undocking uncrewed test to the International Space Station, and now this crew flight test. Interestingly, all of Boeing's material after the decision NASA made, they suddenly changed the name to flight test and they got rid of the crew, but NASA is keeping the crew in crew flight test. I don't know. But yeah, I think that the crew probably could have come home on Starliner. However, I still agree with NASA's decision not to bring them home on Starliner. I think with the information they had at the time, that was the correct decision to make because of these thruster issues and the potential outcomes or the increased risk that these potential outcomes could have had on the mission had Starliner had bigger thruster issues that would have not allowed it to deorbit and re-enter in the correct location. So I am confident in Starliner, but I'm also confident in NASA's decision to not bring the crew home on Starliner, even though we now know that Starliner came back fine, if that makes sense.
I want to get to confidence of Starliner in a moment, but before we do, Space Mike, what was your take on the return of Starliner?
Well, I was during the undock. Well, first there was the undocking hours before, but then during the actual re-entry and landing, I could have kicked myself because I was watching the NASA spaceflight stream, and once they got to the point of here's people's submissions of what they got, realized, oh my gosh, those are people in my area. I could have been outside watching this thing and didn't even realize it. So, but that's all right. The whole thing, though, I mean, I was very, very nervous during the undocking. And as Jared mentioned, it does have separate thrusters on the capsule. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I believe that that's just the translation thrusters. So, like, here's a good example. Let's pretend that this is the capsule for a minute. And
Yeah,
if this is
props.
the docking port right here, the translation is just to do that axis and not its back and forth axis. So even though that failed, it didn't really matter so much because of the direction that it was moving. But that undocking was extremely fast. They don't usually go that fast to get out of there, but they wanted to get out of there in a hurry. And biting fingernails until they got out of the keep out zone. Once they got out of the keep out sphere, then I was like, okay, whew, we're not going to have any problems today. So after that point, I was just like, almost nothing matters to me at that point. But I'm actually very pleased and surprised that they were able to have the successful landing. Things seemed to work okay. I was, paying real close attention to the parachutes because they had problems on the previous test mission with their parachutes. So all three mains deployed successfully, and it seemed like it went down pretty well. I haven't seen much data yet as to what like their G forces were during all those different phases, and especially for the last part when parachute deploy happened. But seems like it did go okay. However, I agree with Ryan and agree with NASA that this was a test flight. Let's still do a couple of things to make sure that we can have 100% confidence. So that's where I'm at with that. So it was very, very fun to watch, and a relief that there wasn't any other major problems.
Dada, how about you? What was it like for you?
Mike, is that the "I Dream of Jeannie" theme song I hear behind you?
I hope not. I hope you're not actually hearing that.
I didn't get a chance to watch it. I saw clips of it on LinkedIn or something, and I also saw a meme that said Boeing stole a permanent installation from the ISS.
Yeah, that was funny.
How dare they?
No, I'm happy it's back on the ground safe. I think if anything, Boeing maybe needs a "and I told you so" or two. But good to have the equipment back on the ground. I hope they get the data that they need to be able to resolve the issue for the future, and looking forward to seeing the next one.
Was it just me, or did anyone else feel like when the drogues fired, right? The drogues went out, and then it felt like one unit of forever before the mains fired. Like I felt like that was way longer than I was expecting. Maybe just because I was sitting there like on the edge of my. Jared's saying no, that was normal timing.
No, I was looking at I had looked at the timing so that way I could make sure that people at Griffith would understand what they were looking at. Because let's face it, very few people, if any, in that room besides myself and my coworker actually really knew what was going on. And I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, if you're at the observatory, you're probably there to learn a thing or two, and that's fantastic. That's what we're here to do. But yeah, to me, the timing on the drogues, it felt long, but it looked like it followed the timeline that was expected with that there.
Oh, I wasn't saying it wasn't following timeline. It just felt long.
The drogues are there for stabilizing. They're not there to slow down the capsule because they're too small. They don't do that. They're there, you deploy them, and then they get the capsule in the correct orientation for parachute deployment. And then, very importantly, they also make sure that the capsule is stabilized as well. You don't want if the capsule's rocking, you don't want to be deploying the parachutes, with that there. So, yeah, it was all about making sure it was nice and steady, and it took that time to get it, and it did it exactly as it needed to. So, but when the mains deployed, that's when to me, that was the gut check for me, was because I know they've had parachute problems in the past. And I was like, man, I hope they get this right, because I don't want to have to explain something going very badly to everybody gathered around right now.
Let's talk about Starliner as a whole.
That's actually a testament to the robustness of the parachute system, because it was in space for 8 weeks longer than it was supposed to be, and it still worked.
Good point.
Yeah, and they also have the parachutes on Starliner are under the heat shield. Is that right? That's where they're stored. They're in a weird location.
I thought they were on the side of the capsule.
Maybe they are. I thought they may be.
Yeah.
I seem to remember there was a note about that, like they were like maybe they're next to the heat. What?
Well,
Yeah,
there's airbags under the heat shield because they drop the heat shield off
that's
to
right.
land it. So,
That's right.
um,
And that was a moment too when they dropped the heat shield off because they did that up higher, right? And then because I assume right before the drogues came out, you just saw this whole like goosh thing, and I assume that was the heat shield dropping off. Yeah,
The
is that?
infrared definitely made it look a lot worse than it was. It was just like, oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah,
fire!
yeah.
What's
There,
that?
right?
Even these infrared shots, I don't know about you guys, but those shots first coming up
That
was like,
gave
oh
me a
no, they're about
fright.
to slam into the ground. Oh wait, that's clouds. Whew.
Yeah, I was struggling to understand where we were, right, from an altitude standpoint, because I couldn't mentally figure out what I was looking at. I could figure out like the vehicle, but like sometimes when you go by some of these clouds, it looks like it could be there, that like ground or mountain, right?
Right.
Like it looks like you're about to, yeah, exactly. You're like,
Even
how
right
low
there, it
are
looks like
we?
they're about to slam into
It's
the ground.
it's
And
got the altimeter there, 34,268 MSL, or is
sure,
that from the
and
chase plane?
when you're watching on your phone, you can't read any of that. I
sure.
thought they also did a really great job of all of this footage, right? The WB locked on pretty early on. We had some pretty great and long, long infrared tracks, which are very hard to do, right? And I thought the imagery team did a really spectacular job with this. It was a lot of fun to watch come back down. So let's talk about Starliner's future for a moment. This was a different type of contract for Boeing. I mean, still is, right? This is not a cost plus contract. This is a commercial contract. They're paid when they reach milestones, and if they go over, the the cost of that overage is really on them. So, as I understand it, right now the Starliner program is $1.6 billion in the hole with a B, Bravo. That's a lot of money for a company that, they need to make profit or they go out of business. So I know they've got additional contracts to go up to station, but what do we think the future of Starliner is here? Is there a moment where Boeing is going to go, no, this doesn't make financial sense for us anymore. We're done. Can they even do that? Uh, where do we think Starliner goes from here? Ryan, I'll start with you.
I, with the result that we have gotten, I think Boeing. How should I word this?
Hmm.
I believe there is a better chance that Boeing will continue as planned with the Starliner program than to halt or discontinue the Starliner program. I I do not know whether Boeing will complete all of their currently contracted missions. They currently have 6 operational Starliner crew rotation missions contracted with NASA. I do not know if they will complete all of those simply because the ISS might be deorbited before Boeing has the chance to complete that contract. So I, but I believe, at least I want to believe that we'll see Starliner 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. I'm not too sure about 6 though. We'll just have to wait and see when Starliner. I think I believe all of this now pans out on when Starliner 1, the first operational mission, can take place. Because if they can't get Starliner 1 off the ground next year in 2025, it's currently booked for fall autumn of 2025. If they have to push that to the spring slot of 2026, then I do not think there is realistically any way they can complete all of their operational missions whilst the space station still exists.
But it's not just completing operational missions, right? It's also a path to profitability. So you believe that they can
I
make
personally
Starliner
do not.
profitable?
I personally do not believe that anyone is lining up currently to fly on Starliner in the same way that Jared Isaacman and Axioma and Fram 2 are signing up to fly on Dragon. Personally, how should I word this? I believe SpaceX built Dragon for low Earth orbit, docking on the side. Boeing built Starliner for docking, low Earth orbit on the side. Starliner doesn't even have a toilet on board. You know, this thing is not designed in order to be able to hold a crew without docking to the International Space Station 2 days later. So, I mean, that is what NASA contracted them to do, but SpaceX had the vision to build a spacecraft capable of more than that. They've built a spacecraft that's capable of having a huge cupola window bolted to the top of it. You know, they've built a spacecraft that's capable of conducting scientific expeditions independently of docking to the space station. So I think there is a thanks YouTube for the ad. I think there is a clear difference in the capabilities of Dragon and Starliner, and I do not think people are lining up to fly Starliner other than NASA.
But I don't think that's the real question here, right? The question is there a path to profitability? I'll turn over to Space Mike, right? Like, if we cannot, if Boeing can't make Starliner profitable, will they continue to fly it?
You know, a couple of years ago, I would have said yes, and now I'm not so sure. The reason I say that is because a couple of years ago, before even SpaceX had launched their first operational mission in 2020, Boeing was the partner for all of like the space adventures. For is a great example. Boeing was the exclusive partner of that. They were also the exclusive partner for Bigelow Aerospace and all of the kind of orbital reef stuff that United Launch Alliance was working on. So it seems like a lot of that stuff may still be in place, but in the case of space adventures, they of course have not only been doing the Soyuz stuff, but also offering flights with SpaceX. But that's kind of unnecessary because, from what I understand, SpaceX kind of has their own way for people like the Jared Isaacsmans to purchase flights. And Fram 2 is another good one that's coming up. The thing that's interesting to me is that NASA already paid Boeing for these 6 flights. And I don't know if anyone noticed this 2 years ago. They got an extra payment. They got a stay in the game payment. I believe it was around something like $180 million after the first test mission had all of its problems. And they had to do, because you remember the one where they couldn't even dock to the space station because of software issues or whatever was the problem. And Boeing was seriously considering pulling out of the commercial crew program at that time. And NASA was like, no, here's extra money, stay in the game. Personally, I consider that a bribe, but whatever. I thought this was supposed to be a fixed price contract. Um, I think that Boeing is going to seek that out again just to be able to finish these 6 flights. And a great point that Ryan brought up is there even time to do those 6 flights before the planned retirement of the International Space Station? I don't know. And I wonder if I would actually need to look closely at the contracts and see what the wordage is. But if Boeing, since they've already been paid for these 6 missions, they've already been paid for that. If they can't deliver on those missions, what is the process there for being in violation of contract? Is NASA just going to say, well, you tried, good job? Or are they going to be like, hey, we're going to need that money back so that we can purchase some SpaceX flights? I don't know. I would need to look into that. But there is a possibility that because NASA is doing things with private partners like Axiom Space, and Lockheed is actually making a lot of progress on their Star Lab, which they want to launch all in one go on a Starship. They may have a kind of bit of wiggle room that if Boeing doesn't, like, if they keep going and are able to do a couple of missions at the ISS, maybe one or two more, like Flight 5 and Flight 6, could occur at the Axiom private space station, because all of these new private space stations that are being built all have the same commonality of docking ports and berthing ports. So there is a chance that they might still want to do that, because from my understanding, NASA already has contracts in place with Axiom so that they can continue doing some of the science and experiments that they're doing at the International Space Station today. But to answer the question, that's all a roundabout way of saying, will they be profitable with this? I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't know what the internal costs are for Boeing. We all know that they've gotten this huge amount of money for it, and seems like they've subcontracted out a lot of work for it, and their whole procedures that they've been doing lately. It's just whether this can be profitable for them. I think that all depends on their private partners and whether or not they can turn around their public image, not just for spaceflight, but for also just regular aerospace. Boeing is not in a good position right now. And I honestly don't know the answer for it. But as of right now, my prediction is no. I don't think that they can make Starliner profitable unless a miracle happens and they really turn things around.
One note is I don't think they have been paid. So I believe the way these, so if this were cost plus, certainly, right? But this is not. This is, yeah, exactly. I believe it's all milestone payments, and they don't get paid until they accomplish certain milestones. And that's part of why you have all of these different test missions. Every time someone under one of these contracts flies a mission successfully, they get a giant check. I would assume, although I don't know, that the operational missions are much the same, where once you move from test to operational, you don't get paid until you successfully complete your mission. And like
That is
that was
true. That is the case with SpaceX, but for whatever reason, they went ahead and prepaid for the 6 flights for Boeing. Just another,
I did
thing. Another bit of
I,
favoritism there, I guess.
I did not know that they were prepaid. That is interesting. What a interesting. Okay. Zach, how about you? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen here? Like, is there financial viability to Starliner? Can they keep running this program?
I think what one thing Ryan pointed out was that Starliner is designed as a station craft, not a low Earth orbit craft, is a really important realization. Maybe the industry and just the community needs to realize it is a very different vehicle. So it's hard to, at this point, be comparing it in many ways to Dragon doing some of these incredible missions because it just literally can't do it unless you want to take a lot of diapers. But I think it'll be interesting to see what the future of Starliner looks like because it is it is such a built-in part to some of these private stations. It's not just NASA's vehicle and after 6 flights it's done. But timeline wise, they've now said they're targeting August, so the next fall rotation of astronauts. Well, 6 missions that takes us to August 2030. Well, when's station supposed to come down? We said 2030. We know Dragon is going to have that special vehicle to bring it down. I would assume, we don't know, but I would assume Dragon would also be the last crew on it. It'd be good to have multiple SpaceX vehicles at the same time because we know them a bit more. We don't know. We won't know that for a while. Um, but in that case, we are out of time. If there's a single more delay, they run out of those 6 years that they need, unless Station gets another waiver. Which, for how much NASA's putting into delaying it or retiring it, I don't feel like we're going to see much more than, if anything, a year extension on Station. Seems like it's definitely at that point that they're like, yeah, we need to bring it home. But
I'm
I
going to
hope
push
there's
back. I'm going to push back. Hang on. Show of hands. All right. In the chat room, really quickly, I want to touch on this. In the chat room, if you think they're going to hold to 2030, 2031 for deorbit, give me a thumbs up. And if you think that there's no way and they're going to continue to delay that, give me a thumbs down. By show of hands with our hosts here, exactly. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you think, yeah, okay. And allow me to cite an example. Space shuttle. Right? That was what, like it took it was like a decade late for its. I mean, they just kept delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying. Like, do
But
we?
was Shuttle 15 years past its best before date or use by date?
Oh yeah, almost all of them. They only shuttle had Dada help me. Dada or Jared help me. Each shuttle only had a shelf life of a decade. Is that right? It like we were way over their shelf lives.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but the life of shuttles was considered per flight as opposed to a chronological period.
Yeah,
And
I'm not sure what
they were nowhere near their expected flight qualification.
right.
They were supposed to be 100 each, if I recall correctly.
you have to remember. And Shuttle was designed to do 50 missions a year, or something along those lines. They were supposed to be flying them all the time, and so they would have designed those orbiters at the time. They had a fleet of 3, I think, before Challenger. The launch cadence was supposed to be so high, they would have run out of a low flight cycle pool very, very early on, instead of being able to run that program for 30 years. So
Okay,
I have to imagine
that's
that was
fair.
much higher.
I think that's fair because it would be cycle count and not necessarily like if you're not cycling the system, it's not. Okay, fair enough. However,
That's
Zach,
similar to
to my point
similar
though,
to an airplane. You got pressure
yeah,
cycles.
yeah,
Yeah.
similar to to my point though, Zach. Almost everyone had thumbs down. There are a few thumbs ups. But like almost no. I don't think anyone thinks we're actually deorbiting this thing in 2020 or 2030, 2031. But certainly, if we do, that's a different story, right? Then like these points are all legit if we do.
Maybe not deorbiting, but maybe transitioning to that next era of operations. Like if Axiom Station is built and separated and stuff, we stop sending astronauts ISS. We start sending, like, do we start that transition as like a soft transition? That's more. It might stay up there for a decade. All we want. Personally, I'd rather see SpaceX's thing push it into a new orbit that we classify as a historical orbit. Like, we don't need to go put anyone on it, but just keep it. Why not? It's there. It's better than throwing it in the ocean. When we have dream chasers in all of our driveways, we can go visit. Let's start our museum in orbit.
Isn't
I know
ISS the
people that hate
same
that.
100%.
of Theseus? Like, just replace modules. If there's things on it that are not working or
Yeah.
running to the end of their life, just replace them.
The
Well,
thing
just
I've
swap out
heard
that
with
Harmony
that is
module. It should be simple.
the
That
thing
whole
I've heard
thing
with
can
that
be
is the core
reconfigured.
modules is the issue.
How hard
Yeah,
could it be?
Zarya and
So
Unity.
send up a new core module.
You could do that on the cheap.
I hear Russia's
So
building a few. We could just use another one of theirs.
Well, I mean,
We
they already
still
got rid of the faulty air. Not, it wasn't really faulty. It makes me sad, but they already got rid of Rosvet to make room for the Nauka module, and they've got more stuff that they want to do. As a matter of fact, if this does get pushed back 2028, we may or may not see a test flight of their new capsule, but everything, of course, is on hold with that stuff. That's a whole other depressing subject, but. Right as of right now, the oldest pieces, which are some of the most critical pieces, is the Zarya module and the Unity module. So we would have to detach the I forget which PMA or TMA adapter it is that is the one that the truss sits on. We would have to disconnect that from Unity and have some sort of station keeping capability with that, and that might be able to be achieved just with the robotic arms. And replace those two pieces, and then there's no reason why all of the other modules don't have another 10, 15, possibly even 20 years of their lifetime before they start having things going wrong. And that, of course, subject to changes if any other sort of emergencies, whether it be micrometeorite impacts or anything like that. But regardless, I completely agree with you, Zach. We should keep it as an orbital museum as best as we can. That would be amazing. And there's no reason why we
I still see Model Ts on the road. I'm just
yeah,
saying.
yeah, we can refurbish it.
so
Boeing is the king of refurbishment. I mean, let's not forget all the American side, almost all built by Boeing, most of them except for the Japanese module. And they had partners with Boeing too. And the $2 billion refurbishment on the space shuttle, a big chunk of that also went to Boeing. And they've also gotten the lion's share of the $45 billion that has already been spent on SLS that isn't ready yet as well. So
Well, see, we
oh,
just
that's
need
a
to
whole
get NASA
show.
inspired like SLS. We just need to take the ISS apart, stretch it a little, couple new pieces, and just put it back together.
What did they call it when they were doing SLS? It was the reuse. It was like their whole
yeah,
mantra for S. Yeah, what was that?
Reuse,
reuse, recycle.
spend some more.
No, they had it. They had a thing that they were like, "Oh, this will be." It's like rapid reuse. I don't remember. It's something like 3 R's or some ridiculous thing. So Zach, I think I
Shuttle
don't foresee it.
derived.
Yeah, whatever. Um, so shuttle drive,
The
yes,
other
but like there was
contractors, like Aerojet Rocketdyne and Orbital ATK, which is now Northrop Grumman, they all completed all of their work long ago, years ago. Almost all of the waiting has been on Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So that
because
might.
if you complete your work, you're done getting paid. So you have to. Well, that's a different show. Okay, so
I know.
Zach, one of the things.
I know someone mentioned it in the chat. Do they have the authorization to continue? And I was looking that up while some of the others were talking. They have had a authority to proceed authority for the first three, which was identical to what SpaceX got, if I remember correctly. And then, if I remember correctly, SpaceX got authorization for their fourth mission after the first, and then either approaching the second or right after the second, they got approval for the last two. And that was like, yes, go, build, be ready. And that's normally 2 to 3 years out from the mission. So they're running a similar, if I remember correctly, running a similar timeline there. The question is, will they certify? And I think that's where we still haven't had a direct answer. I mean, they were directly asked it right after landing. Will they certify it and go into an operational? They're targeting it, but they said there's a lot of data to look back at. And I think that's ultimately the big question on if it's profitable or not is, will NASA certify?
Also, would you want to answer that question? Will you certify if you were in the hot seat with the press asking you, will you certify this vehicle? How would you answer? The only answer is, I don't know yet. We've got a lot of data to look at,
If I was the
right?
press person, I wouldn't have scheduled a briefing at 1:30 in the morning.
That's exactly when you schedule the briefing,
I would have done it for.
right?
I would have waited till the morning. You would have got more coverage, I think, on it. A lot of
But you
people
don't.
were
Did,
falling
I,
asleep.
I
did
don't. I
did
don't
they
think they
want more
wanted coverage.
coverage?
That's the point. That's the point. They did
Yeah,
not want that coverage. Yeah, no, they scheduled it exactly when they should have scheduled it. I would
If you're
not
gonna
have.
bury it, it's 1:30 in the morning, and if you have things that you don't know, then you tell them that you don't know. You got to look at data. Like there's a
Yep.
lot of unanswered questions there. Do I want to take questions from the press pool? No.
No. Also, the best part is it's not a lie, right? Like, how in the world can they know if they're going to fly this vehicle like
Right.
5 minutes after it touches down? You absolutely want to get those questions out of the way right now where you can actually say, without lying, I don't know. I need to look at the data, right? Like, yeah. Anyhow, one thing that you did hit on, which I think will be potentially key for deorbit timeline, which will also be key for does Starliner survive, is the Axiom space station and potentially Gateway. I hope NASA kind of learned their lesson from Shuttle of like, we don't want to stop this thing before the next thing's ready. And so it would be, yeah, I just watched everyone nod in unison. It would be, it would be
Yes.
the entire commenting community too. I watched all of the viewers, everyone just all in unison. Yeah, right. So I think once there is a viable, like actually viable thing, be it Axiom, Gateway, whatever, maybe it's a third thing that I'm not aware of or not thinking of. That's when that's when we'll start, I think, seriously talking about deorbit timeline for space station because that thing is old, right? It's old. I appreciate the idea to keep it in a graveyard orbit or something, but like, it's old. It's time. Like, if the
I
it's
just
time for a
need
new space
four
station.
hungry hippo starships and a couple landing pads, and we're all set. We're gonna be
Oh
landing people on Mars before then, so we should be able to bring station home by then too.
That's
God.
just it. Like, I love the idea of the like we all want to take part of it and as part of our history, but at the same time, let's just keep going, right? Onto the moon, onto Mars. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Who
I
did I
want to
not
keep
touch?
it. I would want to keep parts of the station and bring them down on Starship and just analyze them and tear them down and look at every little bit that I possibly can because I want to know what the long exposure to space has done to all of that equipment, and that way we can make better long duration spacecraft for things like missions to Mars. Or, I mean, why should we stop at Mars? Let's start thinking about what is it going to take to put crewed missions even further out. Places like Jupiter would be a little difficult with needing a ton of radiation shielding, not just from the sun, but because Jupiter also hates you as well. But I mean, one of the great images of Starship when it was announced was it in orbit around Saturn. So I mean, if we're talking long duration, let's bring pieces back so that way we can understand it. And then I don't know, maybe let's roll the dice and let's do a little like MirCorp version for the ISS and see what happens with something like that. Like, I don't know, maybe like attach or detach a couple of the modules and be like, who's a commercial provider that would like to take this over for a little bit? Because hopefully we won't have something. Hopefully we won't have NASA's attitude with Mir, which was no, we can't have a private company doing this because we've got our own station coming online soon.
Believe it or not,
So
NASA has already looked into that. They've already put
yeah,
out requests for proposals a couple
yeah,
of years
that's
ago.
what. That's why I'm really hoping that they're going to do that as opposed to just dip it into the ocean.
This
So
this is a different NASA now. Also, I do agree. So what I don't want to see is dropping the ISS into a graveyard orbit. It just becomes space junk at that point. It's not this cool thing that you can go visit. It's space junk, and it's in the way, and it could become a hazard in the future. That's not useful to anyone.
yeah,
Now, like we assembled it in space, we can disassemble it too. I assume, right? Bring it back, to Hungry Hippo this thing, right? Like take off a module, Hungry Hungry Hippo it, bring it back to Earth, take off a module, Hungry Hungry Hippo, back to Earth. In fact, that's what I'm going to call this mission now, is Hungry Hungry Hippos. And yeah, I think that'd be
HH1,
really cool.
And
HH2, HH3.
HH1, HH2. Well, no, it'd be HH blue, HH purple, HH yellow, right? Each one in a different color.
and if there's an organization that's good at postmortem deconstruction engineering, it's NASA.
Yeah, I agree with
Post-mortem
that.
taking. Oh yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's one of NASA's superpowers, arguably.
Yes.
Can I throw out
All
my
right.
elevator pitch?
Yeah, go for it.
So I do think that we should have some sort of orbital museum. If it's not the International Space Station, then something, and have a way once some of these tugs come online that are using the more efficient version of xenon gas thrusters to go out and capture some of the space junk, historic space junk that's still in orbit, and bring them to a central location to kind of cut down on the space junk. I mean, we still have a Gina upper stages up there. We still have some of the original Vanguard and Explorer satellites. Not the first ones, unfortunately, but I believe the oldest one we have is like Explorer 5 or 7. I'm going to have to look back at that again. But there's a whole bunch of historic pieces that are in orbit right now. And, my dream would be to have some sort of spot where I could have like a truss cage, something that even just throw them into, that people could come in, have like a keep out zone type of thing, but be able to see all these historic pieces in orbit in the state of preservation that they're in. But anyway, that's my space salvaging elevator pitch.
You
So,
are
three
you are
things.
too far in front of our ability to send humans up there. I'm just saying,
I got,
like,
I got three things to say on this. First of all, the oldest piece of anything in space is Vanguard 1 itself, which was launched in March of 1958. It's still in orbit.
Yep.
And it ain't working, but it's still in orbit. Two,
Just beep away.
the upkeep for a museum is absolutely astonishing when you finally get to look behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made. So be aware there's going to be a lot of upkeep. And then three, the public will do things that will blow your mind in sort of the why did you think that was a good idea, you imbecile kind of way. I don't want to necessarily say that we would have to somehow idiot proof a space station, but let me tell you, idiots are brilliant. So
all right, I think we've talked
I'd
about
find a way.
idiots are brilliant. I think we've talked about Starliner enough. I did want to note, like, we talked about New Glenn last week. Jared, I think this one was yours. Or no, I'm sorry, Ryan, this was yours. Some updates on New Glenn. Update singular.
Yeah, let's bring up this tweet that I've got from Blue Origin, which is a quote of a NASA tweet of an announcement that they are moving Escapade, which is the twin spacecraft going to Mars, off of the maiden flight of New Glenn, and they are now targeting no earlier than a launch in 2025. So basically, NASA's whole procedure with Escapade is they needed to fuel the spacecraft now or not at all. Because unfueling, emptying the fuel from this spacecraft is a very, I don't know if dangerous is the right word. It's very hazardous. It could cause damage. It's very risky. That's the word. It's a very risky procedure to take the fuel from this spacecraft. So they either needed to fuel it now or not fuel it and delay the mission. And because of the uncertainty that NASA feels with Blue Origin's targeted date for New Glenn's first flight, they took the decision not to fuel this spacecraft, hence delaying the spacecraft's mission. And then Blue Origin announced that they would then be shifting their Blue Ring in-house payload, which was designated for New Glenn's second flight in December. They're pulling that forward to November for New Glenn's first flight. So they're now going to be flying New Glenn for the first time in November with their second flight payload on their first flight, and then they're going to be taking their first flight payload and putting it on a future flight, maybe their second flight, maybe their third flight. We'll find out. But New Glenn is a big rocket, so NASA, by saying spring 2025, they clearly think that the Blue Origin and New Glenn have enough Delta V in order to conduct this mission and do a different transfer orbit, perhaps I've seen some rumors they might do a gravity assist with Venus potentially to get to Mars with Escapade. But yeah, that's the whole. Things are moving left, so things can move right. It's a bit confusing, but New Glenn, November at the earliest.
Not November. New Glenn's not happening in 2024, in my opinion. I think I said that last time.
Well,
Well,
I think it will.
good. Golly gosh darn it, it's gonna go. I actually I take that back. I will have much higher confidence in New Glenn's ability to fly anything once I see a full end-to-end wet dress, fully staged all the way up, and or ideally a full static fire, fully stacked, ready to go, right?
I
And
think, hot take alert. I think there is a potential that New Glenn's maiden mission and Starship Flight 5 will happen within less than 3 weeks of each other.
I doubt that highly. Maybe Flight 6 in New Glenn. I think that's the timeline you're on for New Glenn is Flight 6, not Flight 5, in my opinion.
Is that a hint that you just dropped us?
Nope. I just don't think New Glenn is flying. That's my hint. Right? Like they're so far. There are steps that they can't hide from the public, right? That they have not done yet, and so I just think they have more work in front of them than people are. It's so much more than building the rocket. Getting a rocket to space is so much more than just assembling the thing. It's this dance of GSE and like all of the things and figuring out the automatic aborts on the system and like how all of these procedures work. It's so much more. The rocket is such a small part of it, and they don't even seemingly have that completely done yet, and they blew up 2 of them. So like I don't know. I'm not on board with this yet. I'm not anti Blue Origin. I love their mission. I wish them the best. I hope that they do fly, and I hope that I'm wrong. I don't see it happening in the timelines that they're giving us. Also, Dave Avery, as usual, right around this time. Thank you so much. Gifted 5 memberships. And like we'll talk about in a moment, but for all of you new members, you'll be able to watch our post show, which I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, and Jared, you had a story as well, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a really cool mission that's going down right now that a lot of people probably don't know about, which is from NASA called the Advanced Composite Solar Sail System. This is basically them testing a solar sail system in orbit around the Earth using new materials. So lots of composites, lots of lightweight materials, deployables, things like that, making sure that these big structures can actually operate. So it was a 6-unit CubeSat that was carrying a solar sail that is 9 meters by 9 meters. So it's big for such a little tiny package with what you got right there. And we had some really great photos come down from the onboard cameras that are actually showing us some of the onboard with that there, and I'm trying to find it in the infinite tabs, of course, that I have open at the moment. But those were pretty spectacular to actually see a solar sail deployed, and it is sailing on solar pressure. They have confirmed that they are doing attitude control and orbital adjustment with the solar sail that's there deployed A-OK, and they are now sailing on sunlight, and it's that's a beautiful sight to see right there, and I can't wait for solar sail technology to really take off and have its day in the sunshine to show off just how good it can be.
What the heck am I looking at here, Jared? I don't understand what I'm looking at.
So this is an unbelievably wide angle view from a camera on board. The top, you're actually looking at the back of a solar panel that helps power the spacecraft. And then that bottom area right there is the solar sail itself. And you can see one of the booms. Actually, you can see 2 of the booms, and then 1 whole quarter of the solar sail, and then 2 partial quarters of the solar sail right there. So that's what you're looking at. The actual solar sail material that has deployed.
Someone on the internet should de-warp that for me, because that image looks like it's really warped, right?
Oh,
like
definitely.
The lens, it's like, oh, Yeah, it's like a fisheye. I'd love to see that dewarped and just turn into like a panorama or just cut into sections
Yeah,
so that
and
my brain can wrap around it better.
I do want to say, which is that if you have NASA's app, you can actually jump on the app and you can get sightings from NASA themselves for your location. So you can actually go out and see uh, ACS, what they're calling ACS 3, to see it from your own spot here on Earth, and it reaches magnitude 1 at its brightest, which is bright enough that even in a place like here in Los Angeles, where we have horrible light pollution, you should still be able to make it out and actually see it pretty clearly going through the sky. It'll be a dot going through the sky, but you could look at that dot and you can go, "Wow, that thing's sailing on sunlight." So I'm
How
gonna
does
try
this
to look.
how
I'm
does
gonna
this
try to
compare?
look tonight and see how it goes.
The Planetary Society has a solar sail as well. How does this in comparison to like size and whatnot?
So this one's a little bit bigger than what the Planetary Society had. This one's also got the ability to actually sort of warp those vanes, I guess is how I would describe them, the booms. So it can actually perform really good attitude control, very precise attitude control with it. That was one of the technologies that they wanted to demonstrate. They said they've been able to do that. This is also made of composites, so it's not made out of sort of, I guess, typical aerospace materials, just stuff like carbon fiber and other things that really hasn't been used in solar sail spacecraft before. So, which is lightweight, a little bit stronger, and really with the solar sail, it's all about being lightweight because you're using photon pressure in order to generate thrust, and that ain't a lot. So it is very much acceleration with patience with this type of a spacecraft. But at the same time, the amount of acceleration that you get out of something like a solar sail, especially if you dip in towards the sun and then sort of slingshot your way to somewhere in the solar system, it's absolutely ridiculous what you can build up and the times you can cut. Oh man, I'm just excited to see this kind of technology progressing more and more as we go further and further in time.
Was this
I think you go ahead.
was this a follow up? Was this the one that was scheduled for after Artemis? Because I know the one that was on Artemis didn't go.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the one on Artemis did not work out as intended. So I
Because
believe
this
that
was
was.
it was like a small one on Artemis. Then like they're scaling. So was this the next size or just a redo?
This one was already planned to fly anyhow. The one on Artemis isn't, or the one that flew on Artemis wasn't using composite materials with it there. That was Nia Scout, I believe. And unfortunately, that mission didn't, they never picked it up, which is a bummer because, Nia Scout was going to be a really cool mission. They're going to fly it by a near Earth asteroid. And one of the cool things about a solar sail was that you can actually angle it in a certain way that you don't just do a flyby. You can actually do like a weird sort of like pirouetting orbit around an object. You could do these bizarre orbits using solar sails that allow you to do things like go from a equatorial orbit into polar, into retrograde, back to equatorial, back to polar, like in one shot. It's really cool what you can do with them if you know how to work your solar sail. So much like a boat, you can make boats do really weird things if you know how to work the wind. So
It's literally a sail.
yeah, it's a
Gotta get
sail.
your rigging right.
What was once old is new again.
You're able to use gravity and solar pressure as two separate forces to be able to change your trajectory.
Yes. Yeah. And they're both, at least it's something like an asteroid, those forces are, the gravity at least is very minimal, but so is your photon pressure, or your pressure from light pressing on you. So yeah, it's some wild stuff you could do with it.
Hey, even something like an inclination change. If you're patient and can wait a couple of weeks or even a couple of months and do an inclination change for free, why
Hmm.
not?
Yeah. That's the whole idea, is that you lower the weight of these things because you don't have to carry propellant because sunlight is your propellant. So
We got a lot of that sometimes.
yeah.
Depends on where you're at. All
True.
right. I think that's our show this week. I want to thank everyone so much for watching. Also for Dave for, as always, being a contributor to the show and gifting those 5 memberships. Speaking of memberships, if you want to view our post show, any level of our membership area will get you into the post show. Some of them even get your name on the show. For example, ground support and all these different things that you're about to see on the screen here. But if it's you got like as little as $1 per month, which is like a cup of coffee, that is enough for you to be able to continue the adventure in our post show afterwards. And as a nice little added benefit, it helps us to do cool things and keep the show going week after week, year after year. We've been around since 2008, and hopefully continuing to go slow. Well, I guess we are the blue origin of aerospace videos, right? We're just slow and something. Oh, what was the phrase you used, Jared? Like what patient acceleration? What was it?
Acceleration with patience.
Acceleration. That describes the shows of tomorrow something fiercely, doesn't it? We should get that on a shirt, shouldn't we? So thank you to all of our members who helped to make this show happen. We appreciate every single one of you. On that note, that is our show this week. I thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.